Hello there, friends and colleagues. Everything is great. Welcome to Conversations with the Curator. This is your monthly behind the scenes look into our collections, our exhibits, and our curiosities. If you have ever wondered how an exhibit comes together or what goes on behind the scenes at your favorite museum, you are in the right place. My name is Sarah White. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator here at NCHGS, and I am joined by my colleague, Tim Betts, sitting right across the table from me. I promise we will get the technology right.
I think we're doing it.
Around.
I think we're actually doing it.
We got this.
Yeah.
Today we are going behind the scenes of our newest temporary exhibit on our beloved Easton icon, Tim Hare. Let's first start with Tim's importance in the community. I would say it's difficult, if not flat out impossible. Sorry, I don't know why I'm gesticulating like this. Impossible to imagine downtown as it stands without Tim in some facet.
Right.
How do you even begin to describe Tim Hare?
The thing I've been saying is, I mean, I'm new to Easton, right? I mean, I feel like I've been here forever now, but just kind of a little over a year at this point. So I never actually got to meet Tim. He died in 2020. The thing I've been saying and thinking is I wish I did, right? Because he's fantastic, right? He is kind of the Easton we know in many ways is because of Tim, right? And he also seems like he was just an exceptionally dynamic and warm and funny too, kind of deeply funny. I've been like very much reading like an oral history he did here. I think it was in 2019, and just very funny and very, you know, astute. So I think it's, you know, he is an exceptionally important person for the community. And the way I've been coming to think of it is in part, so this exhibit is happening, and we'll talk more about the context of this exhibit as we go, I'm sure. It's happening because after Tim's death in 2020, Tim's longtime husband, Earl Ball, gave us at NCHGS a large collection of Tim's stuff, which is, it's an amazing collection, and it's an amazing collection to kind of get to know and to get to pull from. It's really great to kind of have papers associated with really someone's life and then to tell that story there. But the reason I bring that up is really because, and as we'll talk about, this is an exhibit about Tim, but as I've been saying, there's also an exhibit about Earl too. And it's kind of an exhibit about both of them and the Easton that they called home for, I mean, really since the late 70s. So he's exceptionally important, and I think he's a great story for us to tell.
So this is looking at the whole picture, which in itself is a lot. Tim's work as an architect, his fight against urban renewal, his relationship with longtime partner Earl. We can't have a conversation about Tim's life and legacy by focusing on just one facet.
Absolutely not.
Like you have to look at it at the whole picture.
Absolutely.
What does that mean for the exhibit, in the sense that how do you make sure you are telling the story the way that Tim would want it told? What does that look like?
It's hard. It's really hard. It's a challenge. And I would say as a curator and a historian, I've found it's a story I want to tell. And I am very kind of personally grateful to be telling the story, right? But it is also, it's a intimidating story to tell, right? Because it's like, as someone, very often you and I are here and we're talking about the 18th and the 19th century, right? People like that have been like, we were talking about like Lucretia Bradley, that was a long time ago, right? But there's like people on staff that knew Tim, right? I had breakfast with Earl as part of this, right? So it's like, there is a level of, it's different to be doing it about someone recent,
Right.
right? And I'd say really how I have been kind of checking myself as I've been doing it
Mhm.
is using Tim to tell Tim's story, and also using
Mhm.
Earl to tell Tim's story.
Mhm.
And in part, that is the collection itself,
Mhm.
right? It is a collection of, and I kind of chose purposely to not like bring slides today, because it'll
Right.
be like, I want to have it all together. Right. It's a collection of drawings, it's a collection of paintings, it's Tim's glasses, right?
Yeah.
The sign they carried at gay pride parades for years. It's an amazing documentary record,
Mhm.
right? And as a historian, I think the way to tell his story well
Mhm.
is to use those things to tell that story,
Right.
right?
Right.
To, as often as possible, use his own words, right?
Right.
He gave a extensive, it clocks in at like 4 hours oral history that's like all over about all sorts of things, just kind of pulling the words he says about his life, right? So I think that's how you do it. And ultimately, you try to tell a story in such a way, and Tim's story in such a way, and any historical story in such a way, right, that it's like, this isn't the full story,
right?
Because you can't reduce someone's life to a hallway or an exhibit, right? But what you do is, this is why this person, we're all significant, right? But like, this is why this person gets an exhibit, right? So it's like that. This is an important person we should know.
Right. And it's, I know a lot of, when people think of historians in general, they think of people who sit up in back libraries or fancy armchairs with all of their books surrounding them.
I like that, yeah.
I do like that, that is a perk of the job. But also a lot of it is, we say this with every conversation, but the people that we research and write about and interact with in many ways either were real people or are real people because they're still alive.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And it's a, in a way, it's a different skill set, but in a way, it's the same fundamental principles. Like, are you telling the story respectfully? Are you telling it the way they would want it to be told?
Yeah.
Regardless of if they lived 300 years ago or.
Because I think the thing that I keep end up like saying, because we always have to, the recurrent theme for us is the people are real people, right?
Yes.
But I think
what a wild and radical
wild thought, a hard thought for people. But I think the fundamental thing of that, right, is like, to be a historian and to be like a responsible historian and to do good work like that, it's not necessarily having read all the books, it's not necessarily having sat and done kind of all of the research, that's absolutely part of it. I think to be a good historian in the modern world is to have empathy. Yep. Right. And to like,
if I had a little bell, I'd be ringing.
Yeah, to like center kind of everything you do on being empathetic.
Right.
And that translates to someone 400 years ago, that translates to today. Right.
And fortunately, like in this case, Tim only passed away fairly recently.
Yeah. 4 years, almost exactly 4 years. Yeah.
Ouch. In the pandemic too. Wow, I just realized that. But think about, like you said, you had breakfast with Earl.
Right.
Like I don't want to say resource, the privilege of being able to sit down with the closest person to him.
Right. Oh yeah.
It's just like.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's
like
many instances I would like to do that with other people I'm working on. Right.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
Yes. So it's on the same note, it's important for listeners who are tuning into these programs, for visitors just coming in and asking, what kind of museum is this? It's important to understand that as an organization as a whole, and as museum professionals that work within that institutional framework, we work within the community to curate the items that become part of our exhibits. So we're not just making decisions of picking out little artifacts that we like,
right,
and putting them behind a plexiglass wall. that's especially the case with this exhibit,
Right.
of all the artifacts that we have, thanks to Earl. You talked really briefly earlier about some of the pieces. Can you talk about the ones that you are most excited for visitors to see and interact with?
Sure. There's actually two I can think of off the top of my head.
Mhm.
I don't want to, yeah. Well, yeah. So one is, Tim wore very, I can actually give three.
Mhm.
Tim wore very recognizable and almost, iconic glasses.
Yes.
They're like white framed glasses that are part of this collection,
Mhm.
right? They're gonna be there. And as a curator, one of the things I love, and it's actually gonna be a vignette that happens in this exhibit,
Mhm.
but one of the things I always love is when there is an object we have,
Mhm.
and then there is a photograph of that object in use.
Yes.
Right, so like for this exhibit, it's actually a twofer,
Mhm.
right? Because we have Tim's glasses, the
Mhm.
white frames that are like exceptionally recognizable
Mhm.
if you knew him.
Mhm.
And then we have the sign
Mhm.
that Tim and Earl would carry at
Mhm.
Pride, right?
Mhm.
So we have both of those things together, and they're both going to be displayed together.
Mhm.
Then we also have a photograph of Tim with Earl
Mhm.
wearing the glasses
Yeah.
and the sign.
Yes.
So it's like they're all there together, right? Because I think,
Yeah.
and I think what's really great about that, because I mean, there is this like, as curator, there's this like, oh, that's really cool. Like, here's a photo of it in use, right? But it's also like, here's a photo of these things in use, right?
Yes.
And it's like something like
Yes.
glasses are exceptionally personal, right? Like they are on your
As I look
literally,
at the screen,
yeah,
I look
literally,
like
they're
wearing glasses.
literally on your face,
Yes.
right? They are very much part of
Mhm.
you, right? So it's
And
really
your prescription is different than my prescription. That's a very
a
personal
very
thing.
personal thing,
Right.
yeah, and they're like maybe more like dirty or whatever than you'd like, right? But like your glasses are your own, so it's like
Right.
having his glasses and having them in this is very so deeply personal,
Mhm.
right? So it's like
Mhm.
that is an amazing object we have.
Mhm.
The other object that we have that I think is really great is a painting that Tim did. So Tim was
Ooh,
an
yeah.
architect, but Tim also was an artist,
Mhm.
right? So he does a painting that is was part of a larger collection
Mhm.
that was a painting about him and his twin sister.
Oh.
And the painting was the series of paintings were juxtaposing images of Easton
Mhm.
with images of New York City.
Mhm.
Predominantly, the thing that was used as an element to mean New York City, and the juxtaposition was because Tim was in Easton and she was in New York City. But the juxtaposing image for New York was the World Trade Center.
Ooh.
So the painting we have is of like buildings in Easton.
Mhm.
And then the shadowy outline of the World Trade Center behind it. So like, as you know, someone who was in 7th grade when 9/11 happened,
Mhm.
I saw it and I was like, I know what that is about.
Mhm. Mhm.
Wrong. It's not about that at all.
Mhm.
It was a series of works that Tim did that was associated with that relationship
Mhm.
that was meant to be it was like in a gallery
Mhm.
for an opening, and September 11 happened.
Oh.
So it was unrelated to
Uh-huh.
the destruction of the World Trade Center. It is one of the last surviving ones from that thing, but it's amazing, right? Because it's like, what I love about it is you see it and because I think like you see it now, like 23 years post 9/11,
Right.
and it's like, I know what that, I know what that's about because you know what's going to happen, but it's a totally different story.
Right.
So it's really an amazing piece of work.
And that's a really important part of our job, me in programming, you in curatorial and exhibits. We can't let our preconceived notions of what we think is supposed to be happening. We can't let our notions tell the story.
Exactly.
That is
You have to,
not the way to do history.
you have to let
folks.
the objects
Right.
and or primary sources, though. I mean, I think an object is a primary source. you have to let them tell the story.
Right.
Right. So that's kind of what,
Right.
that's what the job is.
Right.
Can't shoehorn it.
No. And then another, speaking of research earlier, you know, we like the research, we like finding new information. It's always like putting together the puzzle pieces and watching it fall together. But it hurts to say that the research is never really done.
No,
Like, there's like,
no, it's never
I
done.
always want to know more. Like, I'm the person that looks like down in the footnotes when I read books. I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
are there other sources
That's
that
why-
I missed?
Yeah.
Um,
What happens?
but in the same vein as you're never done researching, history is never done being made, right? Again, this isn't something that happened 300 years ago. It's happening.
Right.
Earl is here.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
The research never ends, our journeys never end, and the stories never end.
Right.
And it's also our job to make the public understand that as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's really, I mean, like the other really exciting thing for Tim, and it's actually like an exciting thing coming off of Forged by Fire, which is, you know, like as we talk, is going to close very soon. Really an exhibit that goes from the 18th century to the present. Us as we're working towards Tim and we're working towards our other big upcoming exhibit, Warehouse Valley, right? We are part of the community, and we're not only telling the historic story of the community, we're telling the current story, right? And I think it's like this idea of collecting these modern stories, these modern objects, these things, right? Because it's like we are living through history.
Right. Very much. And thinking how when you see an object on display, like take a really fancy, well-known, not to say the Declaration of Independence, because everybody says the Declaration of Independence, but
The Treaty of Easton.
yes, what that we actually have.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Absolutely gorgeous 1758 document, foundational, controversial to say the least. But we think of those documents as something that, oh, it happened 300 years ago, 250 years ago. It's nice to see the document, but what does it mean? Right. And in creating this exhibit for Tim, not only do you have the artifacts, not only do you have modern photographic images of those artifacts in use, but most importantly, we still have the connections to the people living that had those artifacts.
Absolutely. There is though, like as a historian, right? So it's like, if we think about like the Treaty of Easton, right? Like it's like much easier for us to, like whole agree. But like with something like the Treaty of Easton, it's like much easier for us as a historian to say like, this is what this means. This was the broader implication. This was the context, right? Like it's much harder to do that with the times in which you live, right?
Yes.
That's really hard. I mean, there is stuff that is happening now that I am really sure is historically significant, right? Just don't need to be a historian to know, right? But like, it's very difficult. It's a totally different animal to take the present and say like these are the historically significant elements of that.
Yes. That's
really hard, right? Because like we don't necessarily know because we don't know the context of it, right? We can we know, I mean, I think we know like what's happened. We can say like, oh, this is what the last like 10 years have been. This is what if life has been like since the year 2000. This is probably what it's going to be like next 20 years, right? But it's really hard with someone like Tim, right? Like there are stories there that I would bet are large threats, right? Tim is a historic preservationist. The idea of what it means to preserve, the idea of urban renewal, that whole thing, that's a whole thing. And then the Tim civil rights story, right? The idea of Tim and Earl get married in Canada in 2003, 12 years before it's legal to be married in the United States, for them to be legally married in the United States, right? So that is a important and noteworthy thing for us to record, right? Because it is this like when we see these kind of long marches towards like freedom for all, you know, these ideas that, you know, like everyone would have equal rights. Imagine an idea like that.
Wild.
Very often when you get to, you know, when you get 50 years after it, it's like, oh, that was easy, right? Like we did that, right? That was, we solved that problem. It's like, no, it actually was hard, right? And it actually required people to do really uncomfortable things for them at times, right? So it's like, I think preserving and telling those stories, you know, it's like gay marriage has only been legal in the United States since 2015, right? So 9 years, but you know, that's an important story to tell. Like, why is it till then, right? So, I mean, I think it is this, that's kind of our job as historians and as community organizations. So
two main things before we get wildly off track.
Oh, fun.
But you know, we always get off. That's the job.
Yeah.
It should not be a wild and radical thought to listen to the people who are bringing the I don't even want to say artifacts because it makes it sound like something 300 years old, but bringing the material culture here, but there's a term for you, bringing those material objects to us, to trust us, to preserve and tell the story. The people who are still involved in that story are the resource. And it's important for us as historians. I know, like, anything that I look at happening, my brain is always immediately like, yes, but how did this happen? And what is the historical context? And how can we explain what's going on? But our biggest pitfall as historians is that we think of those questions and then we get stuck in them. So listen to people, don't get stuck in the past. And also, most importantly, for something that is, you know, if we think about gay marriage in the US only being legal since 2015, the story is never, ever finished. No matter how much we think, oh, on this date, this significant thing happened. But it is not that simple and it's not that clear cut. And that's part of our job too, to uplift those things. To always kind of be the uplift, but also to always kind of be the well, actually, right? Yes. I am that guy. Yeah. So not only is this exhibit part of a larger effort to share community stories from across Northampton County, but it also very much coincides with our upcoming exhibit in the Shrine Gallery at Sigal. Tell us a little bit about the very boldly titled Warehouse Valley. And how Tim's story fits into the Warehouse Valley story.
So Warehouse Valley, I mean, if anyone is remotely connected to the Lehigh Valley, Warehouse Valley is, I mean, it's the whole title of the exhibit is Warehouse Valley, a Changing Landscape, right? Because that's ultimately what the exhibit is about, is a changing landscape. So we are taking historic images of known places in the Lehigh Valley. A majority of those are paintings. We have some really great additional ones that are photographs. And we're having that same place photographed today. It's really compelling, right? Because you see these kind of changes in the landscape. So like the title Warehouse Valley is of course connected to the influx of warehouses into the Lehigh Valley, right? And of which this is going to talk about, right? Because it is, if you know someone from here, it's a thing everyone will talk about. Right.
Very passionate.
The thing about it though, right? Like everything, the warehouses are it's a more complicated and nuanced story, right? Because why are there so many warehouses here? There are so many warehouses here because we are in a very close radius to a large amount of the population of the United States, right? And by we, I mean the Lehigh Valley. warehouses and delivery from those warehouses and trucking and the infrastructure of the warehouses and the building of the warehouses bring jobs, right? Jobs are good,
Mhm.
right? Warehouses allow us to live our modern reality,
Mhm.
which is I want something tomorrow.
Mm.
I can go on the internet, I can order it. I run out of dog food, I can go and order dog food from the internet.
Mhm.
Comes tomorrow. I
Yep.
need something new, it'll come tomorrow, right? That is the convenience and wonder of the modern world, right? And that's not really possible without Warehouse Valley, right?
Right.
So Warehouse Valley, it is this kind of look at the changing landscape as something that we live through,
Mhm.
right? Landscape is something that has memory,
Mhm.
right? It's really kind of a thing I've been thinking about a lot, and I think it's a thing that Tim thought about too.
Mhm.
The idea that like places change,
Mhm.
and they do change. The idea that you know, maybe things like environmental impact of these changes too.
Mhm.
That's absolutely a thing. A thing I learned
Mhm.
in Warehouse Valley work is that the Lehigh River is one of the most endangered rivers in the United States, and it's in part because of development, right? But really what Warehouse Valley will be is this exhibit that looks at
Mhm.
a reality
Mhm.
and brings it into a historical context.
Mhm.
How does that tie to Tim? Because really this exhibit about Tim is what we've come to see as a
Mm.
paired exhibit with Warehouse Valley,
Mhm.
right? They are, in many ways, they do talk to each other,
Mhm.
right? And the reality of it is, right, like a lot of Tim's work, you know, is historic preservation,
Mhm.
is the creation of community, is the answering, you know, like
Mm.
there's a problem, how do we solve the problem? You know, like there is a question, how do we answer the question? What does it mean to live in a community? Right? That kind of question.
Mhm.
So really why I see them as connected, right? Because like Warehouse Valley is like, there's these big changes happening.
Mhm.
The landscape has changed.
Mhm.
This is what, these are some of the things that impacts, you know, both pro and against warehouses.
Mhm.
Tim is the like, what do you do
Mhm.
answer,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because, or what is the role of one person here?
Mhm.
Because really, you know, it's like the truth of any of this is like, you know, warehouses are a neutral thing, really, right?
Mhm.
They do good things and they do bad things, and we're going to tell that whole story.
Mhm.
But the thing about any of that is that if you see something in your community that you think should change,
Mhm.
you can change that
Right.
because you live in a democracy.
Indeed.
Right? So like
Yes.
it's ultimately like why I think they pair together is that like Tim saw his world, in this case, Easton, that he moves to in 1976,
Mhm.
right? Like he sees it, and then the question is, how do I improve that? Right. So I think it's like ultimately the how do I make my community better?
Mhm.
I think.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a lot. Let's say a lot. And in thinking how Tim fought so hard against urban renewal and how it drastically changed the face of downtown, is this not just another iteration of change could be good or bad, depending what side you're on and
Mhm.
what that
Yeah.
story means to you?
Yeah, and it's like in many ways, change is unavoidable, right? Like
Mhm.
change happens, right? And it's like, you know, there is good and bad things about change.
Yeah.
It is never, none of these things are ever as easy as we make them out to be.
Right. And that is the blessing and the curse of being a historian, is that you force yourself to see both sides of it.
Yeah, it all becomes very complicated.
They got the little figures on your shoulder.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But jobs.
But
But environmental disruption.
context, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right, so if we don't have any questions, I'd like to thank everyone for joining in our conversation today. I think we're a little bit better at this now.
Yeah, I like this.
Yeah. If you would like to help support our digital programming series, such as Conversations with the Curator, you may visit sigalmuseum.org/support. Many different ways to support us, such as becoming a member, donating, sponsoring an artifact. So that's actually a very big deal.
Absolutely.
This program will be made available on the NCHGS YouTube channel with captions for greatest accessibility. As a reminder, Conversations with the Curator will be held the last Wednesday of every month at noon. You do not need to register in advance for this program, so please pass along the Zoom link to anyone you know that would like to join. And a big thank you again to everyone. We will see you next month, which will be...
As I hope you remember, because I don't.
The suspense. July 31st at noon. And if I have, of course, I don't have things together.
July 31st at noon, anyway.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. July 31st at noon. We'll see you then to talk. I had a thought, just no, we're done. We're all right. We're doing really good up until the end here. Thanks, guys. All right, we'll see everybody next month. We will talk then.
Bye.
Bye.